Stunning visuals and animation, a top-notch story, and songs that I've not gotten out of my head since the first time I saw it. That is Kpop Demon Hunters. And let me just clear up a few things before we get into it. No, you do not need to be a Kpop stan to enjoy this movie, and no, you do not need to be a member of the female demographic. If you have a brain and a heart, you can watch this and enjoy it. Also, probable spoilers. Kpop Demon Hunters, co-directed by Maggie Kang and Chris Applehands, is basically about a super dope and greatly loved K-pop girl group that are secretly actually demon hunters. Their songs maintain the strength of this barrier called the Honmoon, which keeps demons sealed away. What's so cool about this concept is how it modernizes the role of Mudang, or female shamans in Korean culture. Historically, these women were intermediaries between the human and spirit realms, with their rituals involving music, dance, and elaborate costumes. Kpop Demon Hunters takes this tradition and reimagines it for the modern world, turning a rich piece of Korean heritage into a vibrant contemporary story. Anyway, then a rival boy band appears and, well, great songs, incredible animation, and hijinks ensue. The animation style is super charming and playful, with clear anime influences, and there's also obviously inspiration taken from K-dramas and K-pop music videos. Coming from the same studio that worked on the Spider-Verse films, Kpop Demon Hunters shares a similar ability to blend different animation styles with a rich variety of textures and a dazzling color palette. But where Spider-Verse leaned on comic book aesthetics like halftone shading, kinetic typography, and areas with visible line work, this film embraces a more anime-inspired style, seamlessly combining 2D effects with 3D space. The animators intentionally use different styles to express emotion and comedy. They let the characters go off-model to express themselves. Characters shift from their super polished normal selves to exaggerated simplified expressions, like cutely aggro faces with sharp lines or ridiculous chibi-like looks. This works perfectly, adding a level of comedy and expressiveness that feels completely natural and never out of place. It's also refreshing to see a film where the female characters are allowed to be goofy or angry or emotional without the animators always trying to keep them pretty. This has been an issue that has been brought up a lot with animated films. There was even a whole debacle over a quote from a Disney animator who worked on Frozen who said, historically speaking, animating female characters are really difficult because they have to go through these ranges of emotions, but you have to keep them pretty, and they're very sensitive to, you can get them off model very quickly. So having a film with two hero female characters was really tough, and having them both in the seat and look very different if they're echoing the same expression, that Elsa is looking angry looks different from Anna being angry. Bruh, you have to keep them pretty while they're emoting? It's difficult to have two hero female characters look different when they're expressing the same emotion? Come on. Luckily, that's not a problem in this film. The female characters are all different and unique. They have not one, not two, but three main female characters, and guess what? They all look very different, and the animators are not trying to constantly keep them pretty while displaying strong emotions or even just being their goofy, hilarious, and endearing selves. They are seen as real people with real, strong, and individualistic emotions, and it gives them a really strong and appealing sense of identity. The character designs are really bold and quite stylized, and you can see the differences in the silhouettes and shape language used for Huntrix as opposed to that of the Saja Boys. The Huntrix members have smooth, flowing curves, rounder shapes, as they are the good guys. Round shapes in design communicate freedom, unity, friendliness, trustworthiness. The Saja Boys, however, have very sharp, triangular shape language. Yes, you could argue that in general, women have softer, rounder curves and men have sharper angles, but you can still design a man with rounder curves. Like these dudes from the same movie, just with different shape language, or a woman with sharp angles, like this lady demon. You see what I mean? Shape language is used deliberately to convey the essence and personality of a character and tell you how you should feel about them. So the Saja Boys, being sharper and more angular, reflect that the characters are more dangerous. Triangles are used predominantly for antagonistic characters. Now obviously the animation is fire. They use frame rate modulation, which is when animators strategically vary the frame rates they're working on to achieve a specific feel or effect in the shot. It's not always animated on ones like people are so used to for 3D animation. Animating on ones means there are 24 frames or images making up 1 second of animation. Animating on twos means the images are each held on screen for 2 frames, so it ends up only being 12 images per second of animation, which results in that stylized, choppy or staggered animation style. In Kpop Demon Hunters, they use a combination of animating on mostly 2s and 3s, but also 1s at certain times. Now, about the fight scenes. Like, where do I even start? They are perfectly animated to the music. Do you know how wild that is? Animating to emotional or story beats is hard enough. Fight scenes are incredibly difficult too. Now they had to do it all to musical beats as well, and they integrate dance choreography into it. I hope the animators took a long break after this because they deserved it. You can't just take a song and animate it. There's a lot of prep work you need to do first. And then they also had to incorporate all the stuff they were interacting with, the other characters they were fighting, the weapons and props that also had to be animated on musical beats. It's a lot that had to go into these insanely choreographed and animated scenes. It's really cool how they use smear frames and 2D elements for speed and impact and some effects too, like the smoke here. The smear frames are subtle, especially at such high speeds, but they enhance the feeling of the speed and fluidity of the actions, imitating the effect of motion blur. The 2D elements also give the actions more dynamism and impact and support that stylized 2D effect within a 3D world. Piggybacking on the smear frames, have you noticed how they really pushed the characters' flexibility? This is another form of adding exaggeration and a feeling of speed and fluidity to emotion. Check this out when the boys are dancing. Legs should not bend that way, but it gives the dancing so much more personality and a feeling of flexibility and pizzazz. It's also quite cartoonish. It adds to the fun feel of the scene, and what the Saja Boys are hoping to convey in this moment, which is non-threatening and light-hearted. The visual style is really beautifully done, and it works perfectly with the comedy elements and the more serious scenes too. We've got so much going on in this film, but they've melded the different atmospheres and moods really well. In the funnier or more light-hearted parts, they sort of push things like squash and stretch, drag and follow through, and bendy limbs a lot more than in the more serious parts where the animation is more reserved. The animators really did a great job getting the girls' different personalities to shine in their animation. Rumi is quite reserved and introverted when she's just her normal self, and her actions and movements are more restrained than the other two. Of course, part of this is because she has this huge secret, this shame that she's hiding from even those closest to her, so she's bound to come across as a little guarded in her behavior. Of course, when she's fighting or performing, she portrays this really confident, perfect, fierce, powerful woman. In real life, she feels like she should be perfect and flawless, like who people see on stage, but she feels so secretly flawed. Mira is very graceful. Her movements are fluid and reflect her build. Lithe, confident, poised. She's very sure of who she is. She's not afraid to push boundaries, and that comes through in how she moves. Deliberate, measured, and graceful, kind of dangerous. She feels strongly, but in her normal life, she keeps it a bit on the DL. She's very deadpan, which would lead you to assume she has limited emotions, but she doesn't. She cares deeply about those in her life, like in how perceptive she is about Rumi hiding something from her. Although she hides it in her normal life, once she's on stage, that passion really comes out. Zoe is so cute and so bubbly. She has so much energy and excitement for little things and a cheeky side, like you'll see even when she's fighting. Her facial animation is much more expressive than the other two's, and her movements are quicker, sharper, and much more expressive. Her animation definitely shows that she's the youngest, and although she is so cute, once she's on stage, a more aggressive attitude comes out. There are so many tiny details in the animation that will just blow your mind when you notice them. They are so good and so necessary in creating the right emotions for each scene. Like here, when Jinu and Rumi are fighting in the bathhouse. There's very dramatic reddish-orange lighting. Obviously, this is a very high-energy, high-emotion shot. We can see interesting lighting setups in each different little scene. When they're fighting in the main bath sections against the other demons, it's this greenish light. Kind of creepy, ominous, although a music video vibe with the trippy colors of the lights and all the steam drifting around. This battle is kind of serious, but it's not like the key moment here. So green is a good choice for that sort of setting to give us the drama feel, but it's not too menacing. When Jinu ran away from Rumi, there was a comedic moment, which was actually hilarious to me. When Huntrix are fighting seriously and Gino's a little distance away, and he says, "Have fun," trying to act all cool and slick before he legs it, but as he turns after his lame little quip, he slips on a puddle and goes, "Whoa, oh geez," and then runs away really goofily. So there's still that less serious feel in the scene. Then we cut to him running down a hallway, giggling with this ridiculous smile on his face, like a little boy being chased by another kid. That mouth shape is so funny because it's so extra, with these super rounded corners but squashed shape. Kind of like bean mouth, but the middle is curved more down, it's less round. It's a pretty anime shape, and I love how it's squeezed in here between the moments of tension. The lighting here is also a bit of a tension breaker. It's very normal lighting for a hallway. We've got Jinu running here in the foreground, shallow focus, so we have this depth of field. The background is blurred, so we have all our focus on Jinu, and we have him mostly in center frame as he runs, until Rumi bursts through the doors. Soon as that happens, the camera moves over a little, so we see her enter there in the green doorway. It's a very clear frame for her, so we don't have to look around for where she entered. And we see Jinu's realization a few frames after she comes through. His reaction is slightly delayed because obviously his mind and body need time to register and then react. So his eyes close and his face squashes a little in anticipation, which is an important technique in animation to also let the audience register an action before it happens. Otherwise, it happens too fast and important things get missed. And also, it's more realistic because humans don't react immediately. It takes some time. And see that contrast? From this wide open face to a scrunched, smaller mouth and closed eyes? That change is another form of anticipation, and his eyes have now looked to the side to anticipate his turning to see her. The head is always led by the eyes. Using these extremes in such a short moment accentuates the key poses and lets us clearly see that change from glee to apprehension. So both of them are now framed here with the rule of thirds, so we can see both of them and their actions and reactions clearly. Here we've got them operating on 2s and 3s. Then as Rumi jumps up here, it's on 1s. If they have a key pose they want to be held, they'll hold it for 3 frames, while the other character might still be moving on 2s or the background keeps moving. This all gives a dynamism and texture to the animation, without feeling at any time that things are frozen as they're held for a few frames. So Rumi does all these stick moves, and I really like the camera techniques here too, because here she's in the background chasing Jinu, and right now he has the upper hand because he's ahead of her. She's small and in the background, he's bigger and in the foreground, showing this dynamic. But she's like, "Nah, girlfriend," and she gains on him. She leaps up onto the wall. The camera follows her, no cuts, as she pushes off the wall into the spin, and she becomes really big in the frame. She's also above us now. She's dominant. She's taking back her power as we look up from a worm's eye view. Jinu is now also looking up at her instead of back at her. Then he's out of the frame and she fills it, and then she lands. And again, we're at a worm's eye view looking up at her, which gives her the power position with this fabulous perspective. And that was all done with such a smooth camera, no cuts or anything. It's awesome. We've also got some nice smear frames here to really accentuate that speed. I love how they've animated her braid as well. It gives so much more movement and interest in these action scenes, especially with all the follow-through and arcs, and it gives some contrast to certain poses as well. Like here where she's about to swing the blade around to Jinu, and her spine is arched in the C-curve this way, and her braid is doing the opposite. It gives a great, clear silhouette with good negative space as well for a really powerful stance as she builds the energy and momentum needed to swing the sword. I loved how dramatic this moment was when Jinu notices Rumi's patterns for the first time. She's in the position of power again, standing over him pushing the sword towards him, and we're looking down at him, showing that he is at the disadvantage right now. We're in this reddish-orange environment, more aggressive, more intimidating than the green lighting in the main bathhouse area. So here he has some cheeky quips and grins so confidently at her, his little demon incisor peeking out there. We don't see her, just her hands, and we're close in a head and shoulders shot so we can see his expression clearly, preparing us for that beat where there's an emotional change and the dynamics change again. We cut to the next shot, and we're now looking at her from his perspective. She's looming over, looking really vicious and angry, and we see the cut in the shoulder of her outfit. See how we've got a tilted line here, almost a Dutch tilt, as things are a bit off kilter. It also gives more interest to the shot. It would give a very different feel if it was framed symmetrically. It would feel quite static. In the next shot, we cut back to Jinu, and the camera is pulled away a bit, so we now have Rumi's arm in frame. Her pattern's revealed in the foreground, so we know what Jinu is looking at when we see his eye line, but they're not the focus. We have depth of field on the camera, and Jinu's face is the focus, his shift in expression. And as he realizes she has patterns, and his expression changes, the camera shifts focus to the patterns to drive home what he has seen and focused on. Check out the details of Rumi's animation here in this next shot. So at first when we cut back to her, she's still glaring at him. She hasn't realized his change of focus. Her expression is very symmetrical here, and she's completely focused on him. Then she realizes he's not looking at her face anymore, and her shoulders move down a little as she becomes perplexed, and her eyes start to dart in that direction. The rest of her face hasn't yet changed as it takes some time for the message to reach her brain and reflect across all her features. Then once her eyes have seen what he's looking at, her mouth shape changes, and that's the rest of her starting to catch up. She turns her head and her eyebrows start to raise in shock, and there's an infinitesimal motion in the tension of her shoulders and body when she's finally realized. We then cut to the side view of the two of them. We don't see much in the way of the environment because we're focused on the two of them and the tension between them now. this shift in their relationship as he has now realized something about her that she wanted to keep hidden. And there's this light coming down from above while the background is kind of vignette, so we have full focus on them. This is a pivotal moment in the film. Then we also have this contrasting blue light coming from the sword, highlighting both of their faces and also sort of giving them this little bubble of light that's joining them together now. This is something that has happened between them. Only they are privy to it, this moment. And now Rumi's vulnerable because Jino now knows her secret. Again, a strong silhouette here. You can immediately see what's happening. And that's what's so important about clear silhouettes in animation and cinema. If there's a muddy silhouette, you lose out on the clarity of the shot. And that leaves room for misinterpretation or missing of crucial details. A clear silhouette lets you see immediately what's going on. There's a lot of information getting conveyed in every shot, so we need that clarity. There's this moment of Rumi's expression changing in panic, and that's when Jino takes advantage of her shift in focus. We see his body curve here in anticipation and to store that potential energy to exert the kinetic energy needed to push her away. She's obviously putting a lot of strength and weight into this because he encounters resistance when he starts to push. He doesn't just immediately push her away. And we see his arm struggling a little here as he tries to get the right angle to leverage. This is what gives weight to the motion, so it feels like there is actual gravity and weight and an opposing force to his force. I could go on about these animation details forever. I mean, I left out a bunch of little details even in these short shots, but I still want to have some time to talk about the visual treatment a little. It's really unique and so well executed. They did really well in imitating the lighting and visual tone of Korean editorial photography, which relies a lot on these soft rim lights, lens flares, and bokeh effects, and soft focus on the camera. They've achieved this beautiful halation, which is the effect that occurs when the bright areas of an image appear to softly bleed around the edges of dark areas, giving it that polished and ethereal look. The sharpness and graphic effect of the animation on twos is juxtaposed beautifully with that softness of the visual treatment. Each scene is given a very distinctive ambience and emotion, and it changes for each emotional beat or change, just like the green light and the red light in the shot in the bathhouse that I spoke about. For example, we've got the scene near the beginning, where the lighting is really bright but also soft. We've got some pretty blues and purples coming through, giving it some warmth, and this part is really goofy, very comedic. As the scene progresses, they get all sassy and glamorous, and the lighting changes to more sort of concert or performative lighting. The blue and purplish lighting increases in strength, giving it a more music video vibe, and then as it really gets more serious and they are advancing on the demons, they're kind of a little more menacing and hardcore. It gets really dark, and the blue light comes from the bottom, giving the scene a more eerie feel. And the demons here lit with this red light to obviously mimic the lighting of the underworld and signify their imminent defeat. Another cool thing with the color use is the way they treat the Honmoon. They're all aiming to get the Honmoon to be completely golden, perfect, flawless. But this film is about how we are not one-dimensional beings. Nobody is perfect. Everybody has stuff they're ashamed of, things they see as flaws they want to hide, but we really need to accept them. So aiming for a perfect golden Honmoon is a false ideal. And thus, at the end, they actually achieve a rainbow Honmoon. Rumi's patterns also turn rainbow, and this signifies acceptance of the things that make them feel like they're not perfect. It's a beautiful rainbow Honmoon, and there is beauty in that variety of colors. I wish this movie could have been a little longer, as there were some subplots and characters that I wish could have been fleshed out a little more. Interestingly, animated movies generally have a shorter runtime than live action, obviously because the costs are higher, and to also accommodate the shorter attention spans of the audience, because obviously kids are part of that audience. So they do have slightly less time to fit stuff in and develop certain storylines. But I still have so many unanswered questions. Anyway, that's it from me. There's still a lot more to talk about, but I think this has gone on long enough. Thank you to my patrons for the support. You guys are the bee's knees. Hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe, all that jazz. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye!